Welcome everyone to Cloud Security LA chapter event. Today is July 31st, 2020, and today's topic is managing misconfigurations within DevOps and infrastructure as code. So a little bit about CSA and what our mission is to raise awareness of best practices to help ensure a secure cloud computing environment, community participation, and that's what our chapter, LA chapter, is ensuring that we have community partnership. A little bit about CSA LA, we have about 1,000 members and we host our events every month. Some of them are actually weekly. You can get in touch with those events or get notified by subscribing to our LinkedIn, Twitter. And for education, we have held our CCSK study group. We have about 12 people who passed CCSK. So definitely look out for that. And we'll be doing another study sessions starting November. And the last, operations, how do we maintain and keep us operating? So that is volunteers and sponsors. So a big thank you to TrendMicro being our sponsor. Call for speakers. So it is open. If you or someone you know is interested in speaking with Cloud Security Alliance, please submit your interest emailing contact@csala.org. If you or someone you know wants to volunteer and be part of the team and also even learn a little bit about how we do at CSALA chapter management, you can also email contact@csala.org. And the last, sponsors. If your company or a company you know would like to sponsor us, you can email contact@csala.org. With that, I'm gonna pass it on to Mr. Jason.
Just a quick check. You can see my screen, Victor?
Yep, we got it.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you everybody, both live and viewing this on demand. My name is Jason Dablow. I'm a principal field engineer with TrendMicro. I really kind of get this great opportunity working with CSA LA and really helping kind of spread some of the knowledge that I've got talking with customers all over the West Coast. It's been quite the fun experience for me in terms of learning what different customers are doing within their cloud environments as they are going through either a migration or cloud native application building. And hopefully that I can share some of my experiences and knowledge from what I've learned, doing this the past, coming up on almost 20 years now at TrendMicro. So today I'll be talking about, misconfigurations in terms of managing those within DevOps and IAC, which I'll talk about in more depth, just to kind of set the stage. This is the kind of the third talk in this series. I've talked a little bit about VMs versus containers in the first CSA LA meeting this year, and then kind of continued that on with the container security, talking that. Now we're going to talk more on, again, specifically misconfigurations of the cloud and really how we can help increase our posture, not just in security, but things like adapting it and aligning it to the well-architected framework as well. I do have a few QR codes if you want to have your phone on the ready to scan these. This one just goes to my LinkedIn. Always sharing content and, again, some of my experiences that I have with all different types of customers. I like it as it's a learning platform, and I learn as much from all of you as I try to share as well. So for those of you that are here live, and an open question to those of you that are listening on demand, maybe just have a quick thought on if you're familiar with the cloud operational excellence. I'll give you a quick second, maybe just throw a message in the chat if you're familiar with it. I will be posting a few questions as well, and we'll share all the answers with that as well. With that, we kind of have this cloud operational excellence, or the center of cloud operational excellence, as a number of cloud providers talk about it. And it's essentially, cloud operations teams that are now in charge of your compliance or operational standards as they work within a cloud environment. So in that, the top right corner here, all of the cloud stuff that you have running within an environment, whether it's, your different services like containers or workloads, maybe you're working on encryption or machine learning, you have your file object storage, you have Kubernetes or orchestration, all the monitoring that goes with that, and trying to come up with all the compliance standards that go with that as well. So there's dedicated teams that actually work on, cloud operational excellence, or being a cloud architect or cloud engineer or cloud operations teams that really kind of know these services in depth, and they make sure that the things that are being built in a cloud environment are kind of meeting what their needs are in terms of operational efficiencies as well. In terms of development teams, we're starting to put, maybe not starting to, but we're continuously adding more and more responsibilities to development or DevOps teams, where now they can actually start building infrastructure in a cloud environment using something like IAC. Again, I'll do some definitions of that in just a few slides as well. But now they can actually create all of the infrastructure that their applications are running on, doing the same way that they're building those applications, and that's doing that as code. So now we have this new kind of input into the cloud environment for development teams or DevOps engineers, which might not be aligned with what our cloud operational excellence teams are doing, or the CCOE. What are they doing in terms of their architecture within that environment? And certainly there's things that a cloud operations teams can provide, like something like an AWS control tower that can really set guidelines or swim lanes within AWS accounts to making sure that things that are built are following specific guidelines. Or they can share, say, some CloudFormation templates to start building from, but ultimately as more and more things get added, you also have additional challenges which can present a problem as well. So as, say, like new cloud services are coming out and development teams want to take advantage of these new services, how does that align with what operation-wise the CCOE has set out in terms of engineering or architecting that cloud solution? Maybe they're building outside of that team's visibility, or again, maybe there's a learning curve associated, particularly with development and DevOps as they're developing for these services, but also as these services get launched, how they are actually integrated or architected into their particular environment as well. So we start seeing kind of a lot more threats to, say, a cloud environment that ultimately is kind of detrimental to how you're actually building within a particular environment. I have some actual research data that TrendMicro has compiled on this as well, which I'll be sharing in follow-up slides also. So also for those of you in the chat that are joining us live today, it'd be interesting to know if people know what IAC is. I know that Victor and the title of this presentation included the definition, but are people using IAC within their environment, or know, I would say first and foremost, know what that acronym stands for? I'll give you just a quick couple seconds to post your response in the chat. So IAC really stands for Infrastructure as Code, and essentially it's a way that infrastructure can be provisioned using a line of code, as opposed to clicking through 7, 8, 10 pages of a UI, making sure that each one of those several configurations on each screen is correct and matching what is expected for the architecture, and instead just doing it through a few lines of code and creating this repeatable process that can be done within a particular environment. So instead of having somebody do the same thing by clicking through a UI several times in a row, you actually have, say, a template that can be run without making mistakes, without you have that complete repeatable process that can be done over and over and over again. And that's really the advantages of infrastructure as code. Here's an example of an S3 bucket in AWS being built via infrastructure as code. So you specify the type of resource that it is, the name of the bucket. You might have the ACL that's in use, also some tags that might be associated with this. And this is just like clicking through the creation of S3 bucket and assigning all of these different characteristics as well. So ultimately what we have here is the way to create a bucket that's in an easily understood format for developers, since it is very similar to how they're coding, and they get information in a repeatable process for deploying an S3 bucket in a cloud environment for their applications to use as they're doing that deployment. So now that we're on the same page with infrastructure as code, let's go a little further on how we can actually help protect against misconfigurations within a cloud environment. So who here is familiar with a set of standards or pillars called the AWS Well-Architected Framework? The Well-Architected Framework is essentially a set of architectural best practices that increases the likelihood of success of what you're building in a cloud environment. And it's really focused on cloud technical roles. So as I mentioned, the cloud engineers or operations in that CCOE setting, the cloud architects, and even DevOps today would be helped by kind of watching or looking over the AWS Well-Architected Framework, because it does contain those best practices in terms of how you should be deploying in terms of maybe security or maybe your operations or your resiliencies. So it gives you that framework of the best practice. So AWS, millions of customers out there, taking each one of those examples on the best way to actually build within the environment and matching that up, creating a list of questions within a particular environment. So as I mentioned, the Well-Architected Framework is built on 5 specific pillars. So you have operational excellence. This is how things are actually working in an environment, making sure that, again, they're built to best practice. You have security, which obviously for our industry is one of the largest and most important ones, and certainly most important for a number of our customers as well. You have reliability and making sure that things can either fail over or making sure that in case of a disaster, you still have the ability to recover efficiently. You have the performance efficiency, which making sure that things are sized correctly, maybe resources that are not left unused or used at maximum capacity. And then finally, cost optimization. So things that maybe shouldn't be oversized for what the application is actually using, or there might be a more efficient way of building something in the environment rather than just spinning up a super large EC2 instance and trying to run your application in that way. Some examples of each one of these pillars. So for example, in the resiliency pillar is how do you back up your data? And a great example of this is, so for example, in DynamoDB, there's no backup snapshots enabled by default. So it's asking you to making sure you have a backup of your data, but by default, that's not a default configuration. In the performance efficiency, how do you evolve workloads to take advantage of a new release? So AWS is continuously adding new services within their environment. So at the last reInvent, they added a new T3 type instance. It is a lot faster than a T2 instance, particularly in network and storage bursting. Can also be cheaper than a T2 instance as well. So how would I know that my application needs to move to a T3 instance if I'm already deployed on a T2 instance? So this is really where that performance indicators would come in for that well-architected framework as well. And then something like in our security, how do you protect your data at rest? S3 buckets are not encrypted by default, but certainly that's something that should be done in terms of making sure that that's matching the security pillar as part of that well-architected framework as well. So the well-architected framework is great, but there is some need to actually clarify what it's asking. So it is a pretty long list. There are 5 pillars and over 10 questions on each one of those pillars. They're all kind of open questions. So if you saw the examples on the previous slide, that's really how it's worded. How are you doing, your backups on your databases? Are you figuring out for disasters, or are you working for making sure that your storage is encrypted at rest? So it proposes these open questions, and it might give you some guidance in terms of AWS solution to making sure that it's met. But it doesn't necessarily give you all the options, and certainly doesn't give you the default versus the recommended options if you are clicking through the AWS UI in terms of those configurations as well. So let's go ahead and talk about these misconfigurations because it's such a large part of breaches as they're happening today, and what you'll see is in the future as well. The problem with first and foremost is the ability to configure everything correctly is that there's so many options. So you see these 5 tabs across the screen. Each one of these tabs has 5 additional configurations. Inside these different configurations, you also have additional options which you can use for these different configurations as well. So you end up having a lot of configurations and no real guidance unless you had, say, the well-architected framework just sitting next to you in terms of putting that in reference. How do you actually making sure that as you're configuring these things, that it's actually aligned with, say, your cloud operations or your center of cloud excellence? How do we know that what we're actually building is actually aligned with it there? And as I mentioned previously, the number of AWS services continues to grow, with each reinventor launching more and more services that enables development teams to actually take advantage of these new services a lot quicker and be able to really accelerate their deployment and the value that they're trying to deliver to their customers as well. So with all of these new services that come out, we're really introducing longer learning curves as well, because everything is new, right? As, say, we move our first workload, maybe we're just doing a lift and shift into a EC2 instance within AWS. Maybe we're only focusing on a few select cloud services just to kind of get our feet wet. But as our applications adopt and start taking advantage of more and more cloud native in terms of application delivery and trying to take advantage of these new services, you have these longer learning curves for building knowledge on these new deployments and new releases of these services within cloud environments. And security isn't always a priority in terms of those first steps. Ultimately, when you're, again, getting your feet wet in terms of an application delivery, first and foremost, you want to create that value a lot quicker for your customers. And security sometimes ends up as a waterfall to your delivery process, where after the code is already done and you're already gone through the testing stage, you roll it out, and now security puts the brakes on that due to the piece of paper that they're trying to deliver that has a list of all of the things that need to be done in terms of an application delivery, which again is not the most efficient way to really empower development teams or security teams as part of this process. We need to get away from InfoSec teams with the list of rules or requirements for security and have these teams work together. So here are just some of the things that we need to really come across in terms of remediation and automation, and whether that's revolving your secrets or validating your security principles or testing procedures. We really need to making sure that these are implemented, because these are the backbones in terms of actually causing misconfigurations in terms of how attackers are going to get into these types of environments and how they're going to persist within those as well. And ultimately, it comes down to what Gartner is seeing, in that at least 99% of cloud security failures will be a customer's fault. And this is a huge number, in that the misconfigurations that are done within a cloud environment are absolutely preventable if you just implement a good CCOE, a good kind of cloud architecture design, and then utilize specific services and tools and processes and people to actually implement those things to really reduce those security incidents, again, by 80%, just by using a CSPM, which is a posture management tool, which we'll be talking about in just a little bit as well. Some facts from our back end. So this is all from TrendMicro's research teams, as well as users and customers from a tool that you'll be getting to demo and as well as get hands-on towards the end of this as well. So 52% of failures to comply with the well-architected framework are due to security issues. So 52% of all of the failures within the 5 pillars all fall within that security pillar and those issues. And this is a huge number in terms of, it shows how complex security is in trying to do within these environments, as well as the complexity to implement and the complexity for that knowledge curve to making sure that as we're deploying it, we're actually securing this as well. Also, the top 5 areas of AWS failures is within EC2. And the reason for this is if you think back to, say, the shared responsibility model in terms of security frameworks and cloud frameworks, you have this, basically the first adoption that we see is basically a lift and shift. So taking a VM that was sitting on premise and putting that in, say, an EC2 instance. Very easy to move your application. You get ultimate control over, the resources within that particular environment. And it really allows you to ultimately have the most control and configurations over that instance. But it also opens you up to the greatest number of failures within that particular environment as well, because there are so many options for you to control within the EC2 instance. So whether it's the version of operating system that you're putting on, the security tools that you have installed within the operating system itself, the vulnerabilities that exist within it or within the applications, all of your security group functionality, all of those services that go around EC2 particularly, they all have configurations, and it all basically aligns to come up with the largest amounts of failures within a particular environment. And I did have a question. You will get a copy of this presentation. It will be shared after. I also have a lab guide for everybody to do in terms of a hands-on experience as well. So all of this will be shared after it as well. So we'll be sure to share all of that information with you. So let's talk about the first steps that we can do in terms of really help increasing our posture within our cloud environments. So first and foremost, we have a knowledge base on cloudconformity.com, which is a perfect educational tool and a free resource that allows you to actually look at all different types of entries for AWS and Azure that are matched up against the well-architected framework that gives you both audit and resolution throughout the entire environment. And it gives you steps on how to increase that posture using either the dashboard, so either the AWS or Azure CLI or AWS or Azure UI, so clicking through and actually doing an audit and then also doing a remediation or resolution, or for, say, more DevOps-minded folks or others that prefer using a command line interface, giving you the steps to do the same thing. So you might have some resources on there that says, hey, let's take a look and make sure that my RDS instances are doing a backup. And as part of that, let's check for DynamoDB. I might be running that within my particular environment. Again, we'll go back to, let's make the resiliency of that pillar. Let's making sure that we have a continuous backup, because again, this isn't configured by default within a particular environment. So here within this knowledge base, again, you have all of this free tools, free resources at your fingertips. We can see that this is parts of the reliability pillar. We can see the risk level, it's high, it's not acceptable. And then it goes through why this is particularly important, as well as gives you links to different frameworks, as well as different tools, compliance frameworks that it might also match. In this case, the NIST compliance standard. It would also match this as well in making sure that this is also configured. So on the same screen, we now have the ability to audit our own AWS account, looking for if continuous backups are assigned for my DynamoDB. Again, you have the using the AWS console, so logging in and showing you step-by-step where to click and where to go to actually look to see if this is configured, or the same commands to do within the CLI to actually rapidly see and making sure to confirm that again, your DynamoDB backups are enabled. You then have the same information for both remediation and resolution. So now using the AWS console, if it wasn't actually configured for backups, you can now say, okay, let's go through and let's remediate this to actually configure the backups. And then similarly, you have the same within the CLI as well. You have this information for across 70 plus different services, with new services being added constantly. And you get all of this information at your fingertips for free. So if you wanted to audit your own account for, say, Amazon EC2, again, that's the highest amount of security problems that we've seen, and the highest number of problems that we see is within that security pillar itself. So if you wanted to audit your own Amazon EC2 instances for our own rule sets, you have that ability just using the knowledge base itself. So super, super powerful tool in terms of allowing, again, our intelligence that we have here at TrendMicro, the research that we've done, and giving back to the security community, giving back to, say, the compliance or CCOE community, so they can actually increase the posture of their own environments, because we are actually all in this together. Our competition is all the bad people doing bad things, and we're all on the same team for that particular purpose. So feel free to go out to the cloudconformity.com page, click on the knowledge base, and certainly you can use this within your own environment. For those of you that want to take another approach, we also have the Conformity Engine. Now, this engine is essentially a way to automate how that knowledge base is implemented and gives you additional visibility into your own AWS or Azure accounts to get those running well-architected checks, as well as checking against other compliance frameworks as well. You can also do template scanning, so you can have your, say, teams, your DevOps teams, as they're deploying infrastructure as code, actually scan their templates against what's actually going to be built before it even is built. So they can get kind of feedback on, hey, I was going to build this S3 bucket using this YAML/CloudFormation template. Maybe I'll do an API check just to see against the Conformity Engine to say, if I run this, how would this actually build or match up against my team's center of excellence? Or how would it match up against my company's security posture that we want to implement in terms of our cloud configurations? Again, this can also scan your live environment, so it's for both your templates as well as your live environments. It's both UI, API based, and we do millions and millions of checks every single day and find millions of misconfigurations every single day across all of our customers as well. On the right here, this QR code goes right to the opportunity for you to sign up for a free trial. I'm going to step into a demo of the Conformity Engine for you. It'll just take maybe 10 minutes or so. You also can use this free trial to basically create your own account. But also, apart from this, at the end of this presentation, I'll also be sharing a hands-on guide and a hands-on lab environment, which I will just add your account to essentially my account, which will give you visibility into some demo findings without having to actually have any findings within your own accounts. So there's kind of two options here. Certainly you can use this QR code, sign up for that free trial, add your own cloud accounts, or I'll be sharing a kind of a lab guide where I'll add your email addresses to my own account, and you'll have visibility into that and into those demo accounts as well. So what this looks like when it turns as infrastructure code is deployed. So you'd have, say, a plugin within a development environment on that far left side. So your developers can actually do an API plugin to actually get template results from Conformity based on what's being built within their environment before it's actually launched and built into a cloud environment as well. You also have, say, the way to integrate with things like GitHub Actions, or after it's already built within the environment, to do those checks within your cloud posture and making sure, again, that it aligns with your Center of Cloud Excellence. And then, of course, it aligns with different support ticketing systems like ServiceNow, Jira, PagerDuty, to actually integrate back into a development pipeline as a bug. So instead of saying, hey, you built this incorrectly, you need to fix, your EC2 instance because it's open to the world when it only needs access to, say, the backend databases. Instead of just having a InfoSec engineer send an email or some other type of notification to a developer that says, hey, you need to fix this, actually doing it through a support ticketing system and presenting it to them as a bug within their application. So the same way that they would fix an application bug, they can fix their infrastructure as code. It allows them to actually implement this and empower them to fix this in a timely manner by tracking it in the same way that they're tracking other bug fixes. So what it allows you to do also is open that ticket and then continuously monitor that resource. So when the developer has fixed that resource, the engine can actually automatically close that ticket. So you can actually increase your posture automatically and get the correct person involved based on these different integrations that I'll show in just a little bit as well. Here's an example of an integrated development environment that's creating an infrastructure as code for an S3 bucket. And what you see here is they're actually creating, again, this infrastructure as code, this YAML file at the top, and then making an API call against the Conformity Engine to see how they're actually doing right now from this point in time. You'll see at the bottom that now all of the results are listed there in terms of the resource, the risk, and what they need to do to actually increase that posture. And they're getting it specifically within their development environment. So now they get instant visibility in terms of what they're building and the resources of what rules or risks they have if they deployed it just like this. And now they can actually create and fix this in a much more timely manner based on an integrated feature set within their own development environment. And of course, when you have, say, 5 lines, it makes it a lot easy, right? Very easy to see, oh, I need to add these additional properties. But as things get more and more complex, so here's a built-out example of more and more configurations within an S3 bucket, you also get the ability to introduce additional misconfigurations when you have something more in-depth or more options here. So this becomes even more powerful in having that integrated directly into that development environment, findings within it as well. So the conformity is part of the overall cloud TrendMicro Cloud One strategy. You can see it on the right here as helping support the cloud operational excellence. Previously, through other talks, I've talked about the container security, and I'm certainly will be talking about some of the others as we go through it as well. So keep that in mind as we kind of go through some of these webinars for the rest of the year. I will be touching more on this complete security service platform, really focused on securing cloud builders. So let's dive into a demo now in terms of showing off what conformity looks like in a particular environment. Just going to switch my share here. And what you should be able to see now is basically you have cloud conformity and what it looks like in terms of giving you insight into what's happening within an environment. So you can see basically all of your cloud accounts down the left-hand side, as well as your ongoing checks and the current compliance and the score of how you're actually built today. You have a number of failures that are happening within the environment that represents, the 28% of those failures, as well as where they actually sit in terms of their risk level. We can also see here in terms of all the different accounts, as well as the security posture and the overall compliance posture for each of these as well. And then finally, you have for each of the 5 pillars of the well-architected framework, how each one is doing based on those particular pillars as well. So if I wanted to dive in specifically with the security, it is at 74%, but maybe I want to make that better. I could dive right into the security pillar of the well-architected framework and now see exactly all of my failures as it relates to that. And in terms of the amount of risk each one has as well. So for example, let's take the top one here, the S3 bucket public access. I know everyone's well aware of this as well. So leaving an S3 bucket open to the world is one of the main security concerns that we've seen and one of the leading causes of breaches that we've seen over the years as well. We get information about what region it is, the resource, particularly if I wanted to look at it specifically within the S3 console, or excuse me, the AWS console, so I can go right to this bucket. And then we have this resolve button here. And if you think back to the knowledge base that I was talking about before, this is where it comes into play in terms of linking the resolution and remediation for the same rule that was matched within the Conformity Engine to essentially give you that information on why this needs to be corrected. So why is this a problem? This is a very high risk level opening up to the world. If your company meets any of these, so the PCI DSS, GDPR, NIST, as well as the well-architected framework when it comes to the security pillar. And then remember, you also have the ability to correct this using the AWS console or using the AWS CLI. So you can do both the audit and the remediation. So each one of these findings within the environment actually gives you all of the information needed for you to do the resolution directly from this console. You also have the ability to do some auto remediation based on Lambda functions that can run within your environment as well. So we have a open source project that allows Lambda functions to be stored within our GitHub that can be run by a user with more access. Because we're just reporting on, we just have view rights for our accounts. We only want to do read-only account access. The Lambda function should be run, say, on a different account that'll give you additional access as well. The other thing I want to point out here as well is actually generating a report. By going into the report structure, you can actually generate a report by specific standards or frameworks. So in this instance, you can say, okay, I want to generate a report on the well-architected framework. And here it has all of the questions essentially that the well-architected framework asks for the different pillars. So for operational excellence, you have your preparation, your operations, and your evolution, all of the different questions that it asks, as well as your current status within those as well. So it also talks about the different security as well. So security checks and across the other frameworks also. But maybe you wanted to say, maybe you're a healthcare agency and you wanted to map up against HIPAA. You have the ability here to do the same thing in terms of having a HIPAA compliance report and instantly be able to see your failure successes. Perfect for an auditor. Print out this report, work through the failures together. Now you have a way to work through all of these different responsibilities for meeting HIPAA compliance. The other thing I want to show before I'll get you guys access to the hands-on experience is the way to actually integrate and what that looks like in terms of that as well. So for each one of my AWS accounts, I have this communication settings. So these communication settings for, again, each one of my cloud accounts allows me to making sure that I'm notifying the correct team, the person who actually owns that resource, in terms of getting the right person involved to actually solve that particular problem within the environment. So, Slack, everyone loves working with Slack, from developers to InfoSec teams that I've seen in terms of my experience with customers. So with that, you can say, okay, when something meets, say, the security trigger for a very high risk, I want to send that to the InfoSec Slack channel. So this allows me to say, okay, for security only, and for this particular AWS account, only for these levels of risk, I want to send it to my high risk or maybe my SOC or incident response. So maybe they're working on it 24/7. They want to see that instantaneously. Maybe you have Jira in use within your development staff. So maybe your teams want to create a Jira channel for maybe one specific notification because they're working on maybe just the template scanner portion. So you now have the ability to actually push the notification or the ticket, again, to the person that is actually responsible for that particular resource that has that problem. So you're actually indicating and notifying the correct person within that environment, and not just sending out a blast email that maybe just sits in a box with 1,000 messages in it waiting for it to be kind of looked at. This gives you that ability to actually notify the perfect person that's responsible for that resource so they can quickly fix that in a responsible way. You also have time checks over time. So you can actually, while this gives you a great indicator of how you're built at this moment in time, we'd also want to see an increase in your compliance level evolution. So we want to making sure that companies are actually building better and they get that uplift of those configurations to making sure that they're continuously building better within their environment, as well as seeing things like, hey, where are my kind of most critical statuses and where are my most critical failures, by the different risk level as well. I can see that I have very high risk in looks like the Ohio region. Click on that, now I have visibility into that particular region. So you can very quickly get essentially information about different visibility of your posture as it's being built within a particular environment. That's really what I wanted to show today in terms of both the presentation as well as the demo. Let me go back here to the presentation and let's talk about how you can dive in terms of a hands-on experience as well. And I think let me just share that again just to make sure. Screen 2. So for this hands-on experience, and for those that are viewing on demand, I'll leave this up for quite a while. Very easy for you or for myself to add this to my own account. So what we want you to do is either email me or send me on LinkedIn, basically your email account. And I will add your email account to the demo account. And I've also attached a lab guide as well as the QR code for the lab guide as well. So it's just a bit.ly link that's 3K5, capital Q, capital I, 3Z. That gives you access to the lab guide, gives you kind of just a step-by-step walkthrough of what to click and where within the conformity login once you have access to it. Again, if you already signed up for, say, the demo account earlier in this presentation, so the free trial, just simply use a different email address. You can't have the same email account attached to 2 different logins. So essentially with the email account, I will add it to my login. You'll have access to essentially walk through this lab guide. And again, I'll keep it open for a week so you can go at it through your own time as well. But again, this will be open for some time. So when you kind of get around to this and want to kind of walk through this hands-on guide experience, would love to have you and happy to answer any questions that you might have along the way. Again, we can do LinkedIn messaging or other types of chat experience as well. So with that, I will start accepting and adding people to my account as they come in. I want to thank everybody for kind of their attendance today. Certainly open it up to any questions if there is in terms of the content or the demo that I presented. Then we can just follow up in the future in terms of that hands-on guide and really that lab guide experience that you had, or if there's other tips or tricks that you've learned through that hands-on experience as well. So with that, I'll just open it up to questions. Again, this QR code just goes to my LinkedIn profile. Should you want to add me in, and we can certainly chat there and certainly have the ability to help answer any questions that you might have with that as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jason. Thank you for that. I don't see any questions coming in, so that's a good sign. All right, well, this is recorded for live audience. You can find that on our LinkedIn and Twitter pages. If you don't have that link, I have posted that in the chat. Please click on it, save it, So please go ahead and subscribe to the LinkedIn page I just posted in the chat. We'll post all the slides, lab guide, and the recording over there, so you'll be able to get access to it.
Yeah, I'm all good here. Looking forward to any feedback that people have on that lab guide, and happy to help with any questions that they might have. Appreciate all the attendance today, and for everyone watching on demand. So thank you so much for the time and the ability, Victor, for allowing me to present in front of your membership today. Always a great time, and always enjoy it as well. So I thank you to you, Victor. Appreciate the time presented for me, as well as for TrendMicro, as well as being a sponsor.